What year did you move here?
Did I move here?
Or were you born here?
No, I've been here since the age of 3. Or 4.
Do they also live in town?
Did they what?
Do they live in town?
Well, sure they live in town. They do not any longer. One of them does.
Where do you live?
Where did I live?
Yeah.
Right now? 21 Atlantic Avenue.
Okay.
Did you grow up there on Atlantic Avenue? Or
I was reared. I didn't grow up.
okay.
All right. No, I grew up at Central Park Avenue.
What was your childhood like in Old Orchard Beach?
A lot better than childhood is now. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite memory from your childhood?
Well, I have a lot of them. Which one would you like? For example, the beach is twice as wide as it used to be. There used to be all kinds of casinos and large hotels here with big ballrooms, and we had the New England Music Festival here in 1949, 3,000 musicians. But we have no convention center now. There used to be the Pier Ballroom. There was one, the Palace Ballroom. We had chamber music in the town hall, and they've taken that over for a council meeting now. We had a fine skating rink at the foot of Heath Street. It's now a municipal parking lot. It was a beautiful skating rink that was lighted at night. So much has changed.
Just one second. Excuse me. Do you have other memories from?
I have some which may not relate. Good for telling. For example, I went to high school in here. I graduated in 1949. We were state champions in 1948 football. And when I was a freshman, some of the seniors put a cow in the principal's office on Halloween. And cows can go up the stairs, but they can't come down the stairs, so they had a very difficult time getting on the stairs. There used to be a farm where the high school is now, a big farm, a dairy farm. That's where they got the cow.
First job in Old Orchard Beach?
I started work when I was 14. I was working 56 hours a week as a dishwasher in Virginia's restaurant for $18 a week.
Just one second. Do you know what the name of the street is? What I'm going to do is
Virginia's restaurant is no longer there. It's where the Last Call bar is down on First Street now, near the old Whaler.
What other jobs did you have?
I was night clerk in a hotel on the main street. It was called the Old Orchard House at that time. And that's now a parking lot.
Did you live in Old Orchard Beach during World War II?
Yes, I did.
What was that like?
We used to see the planes coming over my house, going to Canada and then across to Europe. Hundreds of them. We'd sit on the front steps in Central Park Avenue and watch the planes go over. We had spotters guides and we'd check out which kind of plane it was. I was 10 when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Are there any stories about Old Orchard Beach history that you have experienced?
Say again?
Are there any stories about Old Orchard Beach history that you have experienced?
That I haven't what?
That you have experienced?
Mother took the 7 children into the
Historically, I only go back as far as 1933, 34. There used to be army people with dogs patrolling the beach during World War II. They had telephones all along there. There were barracks all over town. There was one behind the town hall. There was one at the foot of Atlantic Avenue. There were gun emplacements on Atlantic Avenue.
Could you tell us more about that? That's quite unusual.
It's not unusual. They were afraid of invasion. I don't know who they planned to be invaded from, but we used to see wreckage on the beach from ships that had been sunk by German submarines.
What are some things that have changed throughout your time living here?
Say again.
What are some things that have changed throughout your time living here?
I told you, all the old hotels have been replaced with smaller motels, and so there are no ballrooms and no restaurants in these places. And there used to be many fine restaurants in Old Orchard. There aren't anymore. There are a couple, but that's it.
What?
As I told you earlier, the beach is twice as wide as it used to be. And the dune that we're building there is the second dune in Old Orchard. The first dune, they built the railroad in Grand Avenue on. When I was a kid, all of the land inland from the railroad tracks was swamp. And you can still see it over towards Ocean Park. Where the mini putt is down on First Street, that was swamp. Where the parking lots were, there was swamp. Where the foot of Walnut Street, there's no public restrooms. That was all a marsh. And there were cattails growing there. And the dune had been built by the action of the sea. And they built on the dune. Now we've got another dune building, and they'll probably start moving out onto it. You knew that the beaches has a street name. This side of the pier is West Surf Street. The other side of the pier is East Surf Street.
Where did you go? He said, I don't know, where did you go?
And so the police have police powers on the beach.
Lost in Ocean Park.
And we have none of the problems that other beach communities in York County have about people having access to the low water mark and what have you. We did something right.
Just the African Americans, they know they know. After the family drove away, and he took over the house.
Some of the things that have
We had some people come from Buffalo.
Some of the things that have changed dramatically, particularly in the schools, for example, was when I was in school, all of the people who had hunting licenses would bring their rifles to school and leave them in the athletic director's office, so they could go hunting in the woods back to school after school. There were deer out here. In fact, I was sitting in the study hall. I don't know where it is now. There's a large room upstairs, and principal's office was next to it. We heard a bang, and the principal, who was a World War I veteran, combat veteran, saw a deer out on the football field, and he took his rifle out, opened the window, and shot the deer. Now you can imagine what would happen if somebody did that in today's climate. So much has changed.
Have you been a witness in any of the catastrophic events in Old Orchard Beach, like the pier burning down?
Have I been what?
A witness in any of the at any of the like events like the pier burning down?
Oh yeah, I was here when the pier went down in 1978. You have to understand though that after I graduated from college, maritime, I spent many years at sea. I was 25 years in the Navy. So that although I owned a house here, I was living in Hawaii and Virginia and Pennsylvania and different places. So I have a gap in the local history during the period that I lived in other places. Lived in California. In my travels, I visited over 40 countries. All the states but 4. All the Canadian provinces. I've slept in all of them. So I do have some gaps in Old Dodger history.
What made you want to stay in Old Orchard Beach as an adult?
What made me want to stay here?
Yes.
I haven't found places better. I've been in Australia, I've been all over Europe, the Pacific Northwest, I lived up in the Seattle area. I just happen to like this part of the world a lot better than anyone else. And my roots are here.
What is one of your favorite things to do in Old Orchard Beach?
One of my favorite things? Probably the beach.
Have anything more to say on that? What about the beach?
What's to say about the beach? I'm a sailor. I like looking at the ocean. So,
This is true.
and
It's a beautiful beach.
my home is close enough so I can watch the ocean. I'm a musician and I play all of my family are musicians. And I started my first band when I was in high school. And when I was 15, I had a dance orchestra and played around. And at that time, we still had big bands at the pier and the palace. Three name bands a week and a house band. The other nights, there used to be 4 movie theaters in Old Orchard. No movie theaters anymore.
What did you play? What instrument?
I've been playing trombone for 72 years.
Wow.
My son is the music director at the high school. And he plays trombone. My late brother, who was also a naval officer and later a state trooper, he plays trombone. But at one time there were 12 active musicians in my family.
It's quite a legacy of music.
Were there any big landmarks that people may not know about today?
Well, they just tore down a landmark over in Milliken's Mills. It was one of the only. There were only two brick houses in Old Orchard, to my knowledge. One of them was over at the mill pond at Milliken's Mills, and it was just torn down. The Milliken family owned it. The other one was at one time the Methodist Church parsonage at the top of Cedar Avenue. Those are the only 2 brick houses, I think, in Old Orchard. And one of them's now gone.
I don't want your money and don't come back.
What did the pier look like when you were growing up?
What did it look like? It was much longer than it is now. And I should have brought you some pictures. I could have shown you. I've got some large portraits of it. But it had a ballroom with a balcony all around, inside and outside. And you'd have as many as 3,000 dancers there. When one of the big bands like Harry James' band was there, they'd be jitterbugging and the pier would actually be going up and down, all jitterbugging. also an outdoor movie theater at the end of it. So if you get tired of watching the big bands and dancing, you can go sit outdoors and watch the movies. And where the end of the pier now was an amusement arcade. And until recently, the end of the pier was in Saco. And so we had a Saco police officer at the end of the pier to maintain order and discipline. And it's only been changed for 5 or 6 years because when the Old Orchard seceded from Saco, they drew a line from the Goose Fair Brook to the Scarborough line, and that left the end of the pier in Saco Bay, and so Saco owned it. And when Representative Hogan was in the legislature, he got it changed so that we now have a 3-mile limit. But it was curious because the Saco police officer had to be there to check admissions and what have you. And the pier was much different. There were only booths on one side of the pier. And there was a pier French fries there on the pier. You could buy a cup of French fries for 10 cents. Now I think a cup of French fries is probably $1.50 or something like that. It was a much nicer pier than it is today. Much nicer.
Do you miss being a kid?
Say again?
Do you miss being a kid?
Say again?
Do you miss being a kid?
Do I miss being a kid? Well, not really, because I wouldn't have been able to do some of the things, but I'd like to stop growing old. That isn't going to happen either. I graduated from high school 70 years ago.
I held on to you girls on television on the
Our 70th class reunion will be this fall.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
Is there anything else you want to know?
Did you ever go to any of the concerts at the ballpark or the pier?
Did I ever one?
Go to any of the concerts?
At the ballpark? Oh yeah. I went to those, but they weren't nearly as nice as the big bands that showed up at the Palace Ballroom, which is no longer there. Palace Ballroom is where the amusements are now. The roller coaster down on Grand Avenue. That used to be a big upstairs ballroom, and there was a movie house downstairs. And that was a good place. I did work there after some nights after I finished washing dishes and working at the restaurant. I went over and flipped hot dogs at the ballroom. Worked at the grill there when I was a teenager. But I enjoyed listening to music and the big bands. Much better than the concerts that were on the ballpark. Though I did see some of them. And I used to go to ball games when we had a AAA team there.
Do you have a favorite concert that you went to see?
Not at the ballpark particularly, no. They came and went.
Did you ever see any of the horse races at the kite track?
Say again?
Did you ever see any of the horse races at the kite track?
See anyone on the train track?
Did you ever see any of the horse races that were at the kite track?
I did. Yes, on the kite track I did. There used to be a nice grandstand there. And when they put Scarborough down, then they still used the horse barns at the kite track for a while. But it was it was a very nice facility. We used to go skating in the winter down on Little River, which is right down by the railroad track. And it's interesting because we used to walk the rails on rainy days. On rainy days, we would go to the movies for 12 cents. At the theaters downtown, it was 12 cents. 10 cents to get in and 2 cents tax. Now it's what, $8 or something like that to go to a movie. We used to walk down the rails. Nobody ever had a problem. Now the railroad thinks they have to fence all the tracks off. And it used to be a double and a triple track. Because there was a railroad that ran from Old Dodge to the pier at Camp Ellis and along the beach. And if you look at low tide in Goose Fair Brook, you can still see the pilings of the bridge that used to go across the brook at Ocean Park. So that the little choo-choo train that stopped at all little houses and hotels along there. Could get over to Camp Ellis.
Were you on the beach when any of the planes landed?
When any of the what?
The planes landed?
No, that was before my time. Well, there was one during World War II that crash landed, or made a forced landing over Ocean Park, right next to it had British markings on it. It was right next to the brook over there. It was sitting up on the beach. It was a Beechcraft twin engine plane. But the ones that used to take off and landing at low tide down on East Grand Avenue, that was before my time. I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Have you ever met any famous people that have come to Old Orchard?
Met anyone?
Famous people that have come to Old Orchard?
Oh yeah, I sat in with the Duke Ellington band one night. He's a famous composer and musician, and in fact, one of his plays is up at the Main State Music Theater right now, Sophisticated Ladies. But it used to be that the black musicians could not stay in any of the hotels. So there was only one rooming house over on Portland Avenue where they used to stay. And the Duke Ellington band was looking for a place to rehearse. And another fellow and I happened to hear about it, and we made arrangements for them to use the church hall at St. John's by the Sea, which is no longer operating as an Episcopal church. It was on St. John Street down there, across the street from McDonald's garage. And they were so thankful that we found them a place to rehearse the night before they were due to play at the pier, that they let us sit in and play with us. This is the fellow and I. And so I met a lot of the musicians. I knew Gene Krupa, and there is a famous cafe, or it used to be, on West Grand Avenue. They've changed the name of it now, but it was called Man's Cafe, and all the musicians would stay there. After they finished at the pier at night, they'd finish at midnight, and they'd all go over there and have a bite to eat. There used to be dawn dances. You couldn't dance on the Sunday or on holidays, but 1 minute after midnight, you could do it legally. And so there would be dance on from midnight to 4 in the morning for night owls.
Have you ever seen the Dummy Railroad, which is that railroad that goes back and forth like?
I can't hear you, John.
It's this. It's basically like the sun. It's the quietest train that was gas powered.
What?
It was the quietest train that was gas powered. Did you ever see that train?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
It's the dummy train. Do you know what the dummy train is?
What about the train?
Have you ever seen the dummy railroad?
Have I ever ridden on the train?
Have you ever seen the dummy railroad?
No, the dummy railroad stopped operating in the late 20s, but the tracks were still there. But again, I didn't show up on the planet till 31, so I didn't see the dummy railroad. I knew where the tracks were, and I could tell you the route all the way to Camp Ellis. Although some of it's washed away because Camp Ellis gets eroded, during the winter storms. Some of the streets where they used to go. It used to stop at the Big Bayview Hotel that was there until a few years ago. That the nuns had after it was a hotel. But that was, again, before my time. I'd have to be 100 years old to see some of the things you're asking about, and I'm not quite that old.
I think that's all the questions we have.
Well, thank you. You have some interesting stories that you shared.